this is Morphing Jars here with my first deck profile of this new channel. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be iterating on this profile to hopefully bring you guys the best version of it as possible, but for now this is my initial offering. To begin, Libromancers is a new world premiere archetype, which means that it debuted in our version, the TCG version of the Battle of Chaos set, which was released in February. Briefly, this archetype focuses on ritual summoning and a quick control playstyle with a fun comic book / noir investigative motif. I think it's really a nifty little control deck. I think it has a lot of options, and since it is a pretty small and consistent core, it has a lot of room for splashability and other engines. And so without further ado, let's get into the profile. Okay, so to start this off, we have 3 copies of the Ritual Spell Field Spell. I think it's the first one that's ever existed, so it's quite unique, quite interesting. When activated, this card has an effect that basically functions as a rota for the archetype, so it lets you add any Libromancer to your hand, which is awesome. It has to be different from the names of the cards you control, however, but that's usually not an issue, because either they're in the graveyard and you're trying to add another copy, or you're trying to start your plays off by adding one to your hand. It is relevant, though, that does have that restriction. And then the only once per turn restriction on this card is that you can only actually activate 1 copy of the field spell itself, which of course then triggers that search effect once per turn, hard once per turn. But the second effect, which is a ritual summon effect, is not once per turn whatsoever. And so it just lets you ritual summon as many times as you want for specifically Libromancer ritual monsters by attributing monsters from your hand or field that equal or exceed the levels. And so because of this, the fact that it's such an amazing ritual spell, you basically don't neg in card advantage at all from using it, similar to how like Invoked is for fusion summoning. I think that's why I'm trying to run this as like a pure ritual version with just Libromancers instead of other rituals mixed in. So then next we have the Geek Boy, of course, 3 copies of this card. It's a level 3 psychic with wind attribute. This becomes relevant for a spell card later on, but this has, first and foremost, the Libromancer cards the effect monsters all have a common effect that they can special summon themselves by revealing a ritual monster in your hand. This is an activated effect, and it is a hard once per turn. Both of the effects on this card is a hard once per turn. And then, uniquely for Libromancer Geek Boy, when it's special summoned, it lets you add a Libromancer spell from your deck to your hand. Unfortunately, the only spell is that first appearance that we talked about before. Hopefully in their next set of support they get another good spell. Next we have the ritual form of Geek Boy, Libromancer Firestarter, which is again level 3, so Geek Boy can fulfill the entire requirements for this ritual. It's a fire type, and it's a fire attribute and Cyber's type. The Libromancer ritual monsters all gain additional effects whenever they're ritual summoned using materials, and one of those materials is on the field. So in the case of Firestarter, it can't be destroyed by card effect, and it can't be banished by card effect. And then the Firestarter effect is that it gains 200 attack and defense each time your opponent activates a card or effect. So it's kind of like the level 9 synchro from Dawn of Majesty Stellar Wind Wolf Riot, which has a similar thing, except once it gains 3000 attack, it can then negate a card. So it's pretty good, offensive going second card, but it's worse than the next ritual, which will come up in just a little bit. Next, we have 1 copy of Libromancer Magigro. I'm really on the fence about this card, and I think it'll get much better in the future. But as of right now, it's a 1-of just for an additional name, and I might even consider taking it out for another power 1-of or just another copy of another card. It's a water level 4 spellcaster, and it has the special summon itself effect. And then on your opponent's turn, you can ritual summon a monster using by attributing monsters on your hand or field. And so as of right now, there's really no reason to ritual summon on your opponent's turn. So maybe, as I mentioned, in the future, we will have a reason for it. Next, we have 3 copies of Libromancer Agent. This is probably the best Libromancer card in the deck, or one of the best. So it's a level 6, it's an Earth and a Warrior, and it has the special summon effect. So obviously it's not really a problem that it's a level 6. And then it has an effect that lets you target a Libromancer card in your graveyard, and this is an activated effect, and except for itself. Then you can add it to your hand, and then if it's a spell trap, you do have to place a card on the bottom of your deck, which isn't that big of a deal. Usually you're going to be adding back either another copy of Agent or a Ritual Monster, and very infrequently will you be adding spell traps, and if you do, you're already pretty far ahead on advantage, so it's a very good card in general, and it fulfills the entire ritual requirement for the next card, Libromancer Doombroker. This is another level 6 Dark Fiend. which can be ritual summoned using Libromancer card, of course. If this card is ritual summoned using a material on the field, it can attack directly, which is pretty crazy for a 2500 attack body. Additionally, during your main phase, it can set a Libromancer trap. There's only one right now, and we'll talk about that next. And then when this card inflicts battle damage, you can shuffle a monster into the deck. So it's kind of like a hybrid of Altergeist Meluseek and Nightmare Unicorn put together. Fiend from Nightmare Unicorn, so it's pretty apt comparison, except you don't go minus. And this card is like your big boss monster for the Libromancer engine, and it's very good at maintaining card advantage because of its 2 effects. Next, we have the final Libromancer card. So this is actually all of the Libromancer cards we have in general, and we do play them all except for Magic Girl, which is sort of a suspect inclusion. Libromancer Intervention. So this card is not a counter trap, but it functions like one. So it can negate any card or effect effectively by targeting a Libromancer ritual monster and returning it to hand. But obviously it then isn't supposed to be 3, so your opponent can respond with other things to try and negate that, like a Borreload Savage or something like that, which is unfortunate. But in the trade-off for not having this this counter trap effect, which does come up infrequently, is that you are able to, especially if you're going first and your opponent's trying to break your board, is you do get the benefit of it then special summoning a Libromancer monster from your hand or graveyard. So this makes the Libromancers a very interesting control ritual strategy because it helps to patch up some of the downsides that control strategies have in general, or inherently, in which they have a really hard time generating card advantage. And so that's why usually cards like Pot of Extravagance or Pot of Prosperity are like must-haves in decks like Eldritch or True Draco. And so this kind of helps save that and functions as a negate, which is very nice. This is a very impressive card, and hopefully the next Libromancer trap is nearly as good as this card. So we play this at 2 copies, because it is very searchable off of Doombroker. So next, we've got Emergency Teleport. Emergency Teleport is really good. It's good that it came back to 3. Some people are saying this is the reason that it came back to 3. It lets you get Geek Boy out of the deck, which of course triggers on normal special summon to add the ritual spell. So Emergency Teleport is a really good part of any... it increases the amount of 2-card combos that you have in the deck to be able to build your optimal board. So it's a very good card. It's not the best use of Emergency Teleport in this deck. I think like Mutants is slightly better just because in that deck it's like a 1-card full combo, but it's pretty good. So you do play 3 copies of it, especially because it's not a hard once per turn. Then my personal choice to supplement the Libromancer cards, because we don't have nearly enough to make a complete deck, unfortunately, package, which is 3 Meltdown, a Terraforming, and then 2 Invocations and 3 Alistairs, which is fairly standard for running Invoked in anything, especially if it's a major part of the deck like it is here. And so the reason for this is that the Libromancer monsters all special summon themselves, which of course not only helps with the card advantage aspect of ritual spells, ritual summoning, but it also means that we have basically a normal summon is completely free, so you can just use the ritual monsters to special summon the normal monsters to count as material for them. They're the effect monsters, rather. And then you can use your normal summon to summon Alistair and then have basically a free negate, which is very powerful. I mean, that's why it's played in a lot of modern decks. And some might wonder, or ask, or posit, rather, that the Libromancer cards might conflict with Alistair in enough times where it might not be worth it. Well, really, the only card that could even really gain value on normal summon, or is of concern, is something like Libromancer Geek Boy, which triggers on normal and special. But I would say, if you're not using the effect of the Libromancers to special summon themselves by revealing a ritual monster, which of course then means you don't have a ritual monster in hand, well then you're not going to get very far into the Libromancer combos. You didn't open up 2 cards for the 2-card combo, and so normal summon Alistair would get you further for that game plan to like help you with that bricked hand anyways. So I think there isn't really a conflict, and it'll always be better to summon Alistair. Normal summon Alistair. So then we go into the more generic cards here. So we play TCBO, which is played in a lot of Invoked deck, but particularly in this deck, it's amazing. All of the main deck monsters, the ritual monsters, the extra deck monsters, they're all different types, except for the conflict of Magic Girl and Alistair, which is kind of another reason I don't want to play Magic Girl in the deck, but I'm giving it a chance. And then finally, Agent conflicts with another monster we'll get to later on. And that's not even that big of a confliction, and it's worth it. So you'll see this card is very good. But I do play it too because Floodgates at 3 can be kind of bricky. Next we have Dogmatica Punishment. So Dogmatica Punishment is just a great card in general, and we don't go into the extra deck all that often. And in fact, it can be a source of utility for dumping things like Omega, Cyframe Lord Omega. And so it helps us with removal to get over some pretty big monsters, and it helps protect our board with things like by sending a Wind Pegasus, for example. And so Dogmatica Punishment is just an excellent card in this deck. Play it too. Then we have 3 copies of Imperm. It's just a really good hand trap, one of the best in this format, and so I like playing it. Additionally, it is a trap, so it can help to obfuscate some of the back rows so that it's not quite so clear which is which. Because obviously they know which one is the intervention, so they can maybe try and snipe it with the Cosmic. But then Imperm helps protect your TCBO and your punishment and things like that, because Imperm is not the most effective trap. It's a very effective hand trap, but that being said. And then we do play 1 copy of Ghost Ogre, because as mentioned before, Emergency Teleport is not the best card, or it's not the best way to get into Geek Boy. Sometimes you can get into it just by special summoning it, and so you don't want to use your E-Teller to summon just a random level 3 body that you don't need all the time. And so sometimes Ghost Ogre comes up. It's a pretty good hand trap this format, and since it can be sent from the field, you can just set E-Telly, use it on your opponent's turn, and then get some immediate value off of that. Then, of course, we're playing 1 copy of Called by the Grave, pretty standard. And then finally, buried the lead a little bit on this. Didn't mention it before, but I think it's a very important part of the deck. We're playing the DPE package, the Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. This Plasma should be a Dasher. If you have a Dasher, play a Dasher. It doesn't matter all that much, because you will sometimes have level 3 bodies sitting on the field, and also any monster you add to your hand will more than likely be able to be special summoned anyways, so it doesn't really matter all that much, but Dasher is technically better than Plasma. I just don't have one. And in this deck, so DPE is the one conflict with TCBO, the one meaningful one with Agent, but if you need to bring Agent back, you can or you need to put it on the field, you can just pop it, use the DPE's ability to pop itself and a card your opponent controls, or like Outshift and Floodgate or something like that, and then you can just bring Agent back. So that's not the worst conflict in the world, and DPE is just so powerful, and it helps you with going positive on card advantage relative to your opponent, because you can be destroying cards they control every single turn. And it's also really good into like control mirror matches, like against Eldritch, because that deck just folds to having all of their back rows sniped turn after turn. Okay, so that is it for the main deck. So now we will go into the extra deck. So in the extra deck, our first cards, I guess, is the Nightmare Unicorn and Access Code Talker. Very often on turn 3, you'll have cards left over, like you have a Makaba, and then you'll have like a random Libromancer sitting on the field because you brought it back with intervention that you use that turn or something like that. And so it's very easy to go into a really fast Access Code Talker line, especially if you made Verte and then just have random Link 2 material sitting around. You can go into Unicorn, Access Code Talker, OTK from there, with all of it backed up by a Makaba, which is pretty good. Next, we have the 3 Alistair, the Invoker links. We've got Amirage, Gardna, and Artemis. So if you've never seen this before, then maybe you've never played an Invoked deck before, but these are just monsters that you can go into, link once, off of Alistair himself, to then be able to banish them from the field using Evocation. Basically, it makes Alistair a 1-card Makaba, these 3 link monsters. Usually decks either play Secure Gardna on Amirage or Artemis. I like playing 3, because oftentimes it's worth putting them in the grave, and it's useful to have the options of putting like the Fire in the Grave for Purgatrio or Artemis. Technically, Magic Girl can be linked off for Artemis too, so that's a little bit of synergy there. I just like having both. It makes Alistair live much more often. And we're not super tight on space in the extra deck. Next, we've got the Invoked Fusions. Our Invoked Fusions of choice are 2 Makabas, which comes up very often. I wouldn't really ever play less than 2 Makabas. Then we've got 1 Purgatrio because of the Amirage, and because the Fire Starter is also a Fire type, and so you can make Purgatrio much more often than in other Invoked decks. 1 Raijin for the same reason, because Geek Boy is a Wind type, and it doesn't usually hurt you to banish a Wind attribute monster, or banish Geek Boy from your graveyard, and Raijin is very good if you can play it, if you have the space for it. So it just is like if you have extra Invocation sitting around, it's useful. And then an Agoides for when you need to push for lethal or pop an opponent's monster. And then finally, or sorry, not finally, we have the Punishment package, which is just 1 Omegas, 1 Omega, 1 Wind Pegasus, 1 Entis. Entis and Wind Pegasus are kind of, they explain themselves, because Entis is just if you want to pop a back row or a card or you need to pop a monster that you don't have a monster whose attack is greater than it in your extra deck, you can send Entis. Wind Pegasus helps protect your board. If you just need to pop one monster, you can send Wind Pegasus, and then it helps protect against destruction by shuffling a card in. And then Omega is really good into the DPE mirror because you can just shuffle back your opponent's DPE. You can try and pop it with Omega. Like, if it's used as effect, you pop it with punishment, sending Omega. Omega shuffles back their DPE, and there's not really anything they can do because they can't Fusion Destiny again because no one's going to run 2 sets of bricks in their deck. And then finally, we have the DPE package, the Destroyer Destiny Hero, Destroyer, Phoenix Enforcer, and Petal Vampire Jane Conte. It's kind of expensive, but it is worth it. It's very powerful in any control deck, very powerful in almost any deck in general, so definitely worth playing. So that's it for the main and extra. I do have a side deck that I'm working on. I'm not quite sure about it, but I will take it to locals, test it out, and then if you guys do like this video and you want to see it, or you want to know what the side deck is, just leave in the comments, and maybe I can mention it at the start of the next video or something like that.